There's a quick check sitting just off the highway about 25 minutes from my house. For most people, that would probably sound like a bit of a drive just to grab a snack. But where I live, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by empty roads and stretches of darkness, it's basically the closest thing I have to a convenience store. It's the only place in town that's open 24 hours a day. No matter what time it is, whether it's early morning or the middle of the night, when the entire world feels abandoned, those bright fluorescent lights are always glowing in the distance. And because my sleep schedule has been completely ruined for years, I've found myself there more times than I can count. I'm the kind of person who disappears into the background. Nothing about me stands out. I'm average height, average build, and I don't exactly have a memorable appearance. I like to think I'm the type of person people forget about 5 minutes after seeing me. But after showing up there countless times in the middle of the night, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the employees started recognizing me. They probably knew me as that strange guy who always appeared when normal people were asleep. What happened last week, though, was something I still can't fully explain. The memory is still fresh. Every detail is burned into my mind. It was sometime after midnight, and I was sitting at my desk working on my laptop. For whatever reason, my brain seems to come alive during the hours when everyone else is shutting down. Between 9 at night and 3 in the morning, I'm usually at my most focused. It's when I get the most work done. That night, I was completely locked in. The kind of focus where you lose track of time. The kind where hours disappear without you noticing. But there's always a downside to staying up that late. Eventually, your body reminds you that you're still human. One minute, you're perfectly comfortable, and the next, your stomach feels like it's eating itself. That was exactly what happened. Around 2 in the morning, I finally gave up, closed my laptop, and decided to make the drive to Quick Check for something to eat. Before I continue, it's important to understand what the road there is like. The highway near my house isn't anything like the busy interstates you see around cities. It's more like a forgotten local road that happens to have highway signs. During the day, there are barely any cars. At night, it's almost completely empty. The kind of road where you can drive for miles and not see another person. The kind of road where if something happened to you, nobody would know for a very long time. The drive there was normal, quiet, almost too quiet. I eventually pulled into the parking lot, walked inside, ordered a sandwich, and started wandering around while I waited. I've always had trouble sitting still. Between my constant need to move and my naturally restless brain, waiting around feels impossible. So I started pacing through the aisles, pretending to look at snacks and drinks. That's when I noticed something strange. At first, my brain didn't even process what I was seeing. Near the back of the store, right in front of one of the large refrigerators, there was someone sitting on the floor. Not standing, not leaning, sitting, cross-legged, right there at the end of the aisle. The person was facing the refrigerator doors completely still, like they were studying whatever was behind the glass. For a moment, I convinced myself I had just seen something incorrectly. Maybe it was a pile of clothes. Maybe it was some kind of store equipment. But then I looked again, and there was definitely a person sitting on the floor. I could only see the back of him at first. He was wearing a brown jacket and a pair of jeans. Nothing about his clothing was unusual, but the way he was sitting there alone in a nearly empty store at 2 in the morning staring into a refrigerator without moving was deeply unsettling. I needed to see his face, not because I was curious, because something about the situation felt wrong. I walked a few aisles away and came up with a plan. I would turn the corner quickly, get a glimpse of him, then immediately look away and continue walking. I didn't want to make it obvious that I was watching him. Staring at strangers is rude, after all. But honestly, I don't think I was prepared for what I was about to see. The second I turned the corner, his head snapped around. Not slowly, not naturally, instantly, like he had been waiting for me to look. His eyes locked onto mine. The sudden movement caught me so off guard that I froze. For a few seconds, I completely forgot why I was there. I forgot about my food. I forgot about leaving. I just stood there staring at this person. And the moment I saw his face, every instinct in my body told me something was seriously wrong. This guy looked completely out of place. His eyes were stretched wide open, almost unnaturally wide, like he hadn't blinked in hours. His lips were trembling violently, constantly quivering like he was freezing, even though the store was warm and he was already wearing a thick jacket. His body was twisted into this strange, uncomfortable position. It didn't look like he was sitting. It looked like he was forcing himself to stay in that position. Like every muscle in his body was tense. But the worst part wasn't his appearance. It was his expression. There was no anger, no fear, no confusion, no emotion at all. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't threatening me. He was simply staring. A completely empty stare. A lifeless stare. The kind of stare that makes you wonder if the person looking back at you is actually there. I felt a wave of discomfort run through me. Everything about him screamed that something was wrong. After several seconds of this silent staring contest, I finally looked away. I walked down another aisle and tried to act normal, but my heart was pounding. I stood near the counter waiting for my sandwich, but I couldn't relax. I kept thinking about him. I kept imagining him suddenly appearing at the end of an aisle. I kept wondering what I would do if he walked toward me. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know if I should leave immediately, or if leaving would somehow make things worse. So I positioned myself where I could see the corner of the store where he had been sitting. I waited and waited, but he never appeared. The store stayed silent. Eventually, my food was ready. I grabbed it and walked out as quickly as I could. I told myself that was the end of it, that I was overthinking things, that maybe the guy was just someone having a bad night. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he was under the influence. Maybe there was a normal explanation. I wanted to believe that, but then as I was turning onto the highway, something caught my attention. A sudden movement, a blur near the edge of my vision. I looked back toward the quick check, and I saw someone running. Not walking, not jogging, running at full speed. The figure was sprinting from the store entrance toward the far end of the parking lot. Even though I was already halfway onto the highway, I immediately recognized the brown jacket. It was him. My stomach dropped. I watched as he reached a truck parked in the darkness and quickly climbed inside. I don't know what he was doing there. I don't know where he was going. And honestly, I don't want to know. There was something deeply unsettling about seeing that man sitting motionless in the store one moment and then suddenly rushing across an empty parking lot at 2 in the morning. I stepped harder on the gas. I just wanted to get home. I wanted distance between me and that place. Between me and him, the lights from the quick check slowly disappeared behind me. The glow of the parking lot faded. The road became darker. Soon I was alone again, driving through endless empty stretches of highway. And for the first time that night I realized something that made my hands tighten around the steering wheel. Out there, surrounded by miles of darkness, there was nobody around. Nobody watching. Nobody coming. And somewhere behind me, that man was still on the road too. I was used to driving on empty roads that late at night. In fact, that was one of the things I liked about living where I did. Once midnight passed, the roads belonged to almost nobody. There were no traffic jams, no impatient drivers, no distractions. Just me, the darkness, and the occasional glow of distant signs disappearing behind me. So when I suddenly noticed a pair of headlights appearing in my rearview mirror, it immediately caught my attention. At first, I didn't think much of it. A car behind me wasn't unusual. But then I noticed something. The headlights weren't staying the same distance away. They were getting closer. Fast. Whoever was behind me was gaining on me quickly. And that was strange because I wasn't exactly driving slowly. My first thought was that I was about to get pulled over. I instinctively eased my foot off the gas. I checked my speed. I waited for the inevitable flash of red and blue lights. I could already imagine how the night would end. A lecture from a police officer, a speeding ticket, a long explanation about why I was flying down an empty road at 2 in the morning. But then, the vehicle got close enough for me to see it clearly, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't some random driver. It was him, the man from Quick Check, the same truck, the same vehicle I watched him climb into in that empty parking lot. There was no doubt in my mind. I knew exactly who was behind me. The same person who had been sitting motionless on the floor of that store, the same person whose dead empty stare had made every instinct in my body scream that something was wrong. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Without thinking, I pressed my foot back down on the accelerator. I wasn't trying to be reckless. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted distance. I wanted that truck as far away from me as possible. Almost immediately, the truck behind me started flashing its headlights. Then came the horn, once, twice, again and again. I had no idea what he wanted. I didn't know if he was angry trying to get my attention or trying to force me to stop. And that was the terrifying part. Because deep down, I already knew one thing. I did not want to stop. For a few seconds, my mind was racing. Do I keep driving? Do I pull over? Do I try to lose him? Every option felt dangerous. I was driving a regular sedan. He was in a pickup truck, a much heavier vehicle. A vehicle that could do serious damage if he decided to use it against me. But I also knew my car was faster. So I made a decision. I was going to outrun him. At least that was what I told myself. The faster I drove, though, the worse the fear became. There is a difference between being scared and experiencing true terror. Fear is knowing something bad might happen. Terror is knowing something bad is already happening. And in that moment, I felt like I was racing away from death itself. The speedometer climbed higher. 80 miles per hour. 90. Then 100. But instead of feeling safer, I felt trapped. Every second I stayed on that road, every second I kept pushing faster, the voice in my head became louder. Something was wrong. This was not a normal person trying to pass me. This was someone chasing me. Someone who had followed me out of that parking lot. Someone who knew exactly where I was. I moved into the right lane hoping he would finally pass. I thought maybe he was just an aggressive driver. Maybe he would speed around me and disappear. But he didn't. The truck moved with me. He stayed behind. I felt my stomach sink. He wasn't trying to pass. He was staying with me. I started slowing down. My plan was to pull onto the shoulder, create some distance, and let him go. Maybe if I stopped reacting, he would lose interest. Maybe this would end. But the second I lifted my foot off the gas, everything changed. The truck slammed into me. Hard. The impact jolted my entire body. My hands nearly slipped off the steering wheel as my car shook violently. For a moment, I couldn't process what had happened. Then the realization hit me. He wasn't trying to scare me. He wasn't trying to get my attention. He was trying to hurt me. He was trying to kill me. Everything became a blur. The road, the darkness, the sound of the engine, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I knew he was going to hit me again, and at that speed, one wrong move would send my car spinning. I could already imagine losing control, rolling over, ending up somewhere off the highway where nobody would find me until morning. I don't know if it was pure panic or some survival instinct taking over, but the moment I saw the truck begin moving toward me again, I reacted. I turned sharply to the left. Then I slammed on the brakes. The truck missed. It shot past me. For a second, everything went silent. Then I watched through my windshield as the pickup started swerving. Left, right, left again. The driver completely lost control. The truck flew across the road, slid off the highway, and disappeared into the field beside the pavement. I sat there for a moment frozen. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. My entire body felt like it was vibrating from adrenaline. I was terrified, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Not on that empty road. Not knowing whether he was going to recover. Not knowing if he was going to come after me again. So I forced myself to drive. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove all the way home like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it felt like it did. The second I got inside, I locked the door behind me and called the police. I explained everything. The quick check. The man. The truck. The chase. The collision. They took my statement even though I couldn't give them an exact location for everything that happened on the highway. But I knew one thing. That quick check had security cameras. The parking lot would have recorded him. They would have his vehicle. They would have evidence. At least that's what I hoped. It's been a week since it happened and I still haven't heard anything. My car wasn't destroyed, but it definitely took damage. I still need to get it repaired. And the question that keeps bothering me is the same one I have asked myself every night since then. Why me? Why did that man choose to follow me? Why did he decide that I was the person he wanted to chase? I don't have an answer. Maybe I never will. All I know is that I never want to see that truck again. I never want to see that man again. Because sometimes the scariest moments in life aren't the ones where you know you're in danger. They're the moments when you realize someone else has made a decision about you, and their decision is something you may not survive. The more she talked, the less sense anything made. Every answer she gave only created more questions. Her story kept changing. Her explanations were vague. She avoided looking at me, avoided answering simple questions, and every instinct I had was telling me that something was wrong. At first I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. But the longer she sat there, the more uncomfortable I became. I was already leaning toward telling her to get out of my car. I was just about to make that decision when I looked back toward her vehicle one more time, and that's when I saw him. A man stepped out from behind the red hatchback. My blood ran cold. He hadn't been walking toward us. He hadn't been approaching from the road. He had been hiding, standing there, waiting. The realization hit me so hard that I felt my entire body tense up. Every warning signal in my brain went off at once. I immediately turned my attention back toward the road, and that's when I saw something even worse. Another person, standing directly in front of us, about 50 feet away, just standing there in the middle of the road, blocking our path. I couldn't make out much in the darkness, but I could see that he was holding something long in his hands. A pipe. A bat. Some kind of weapon. I couldn't tell. And honestly, I didn't need to. The message was clear. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a stranded driver. I had driven into something I was never supposed to see. The figure started moving toward us, slowly, purposefully. That was the moment my survival instinct completely took over. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my foot onto the accelerator. The engine roared as the car launched forward. I didn't care if it looked suspicious. I didn't care if I frightened her. I just needed to get away. The woman immediately spun around in her seat and looked behind us. The second she saw what was happening, she started screaming, not panicking, not asking what was going on, screaming. Then she suddenly reached down and started digging through her purse. Fast, desperately. My heart sank, because I had a pretty good idea what she was searching for. I reacted before she had the chance to find it. I shouted for her to freeze. Then I pulled my firearm. I didn't point it at her. I didn't want to hurt her. Instead, I placed it on the steering wheel where she could clearly see it. A warning. A message. Whatever she was reaching for, she stopped immediately. Her hand froze. The screaming stopped. The movement stopped. For several seconds, the only sound inside the vehicle was the engine and the sound of our breathing. I told her not to move. And surprisingly, she listened. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten me. She didn't say another word. She just stared straight ahead. Her expression was impossible to read. Fear. Anger. Regret? I honestly couldn't tell. The next 30 minutes felt like the longest drive of my life. Every second I expected something to happen. I expected her to make another move. I expected another vehicle to appear behind us. I expected someone to start chasing us down the highway. But somehow we made it. We were less than 30 minutes away from Artesia. Eventually I pulled into a gas station. There were 2 other vehicles parked there. Both were large trucks. Seeing other people around was the first time all night I felt even slightly safe. I looked at her and told her to get out. At first she refused. She gave me some excuse, some explanation that didn't even make sense. But I wasn't interested in hearing another lie. I leaned over, opened the passenger door, and forced her out of the vehicle. She stumbled onto the pavement and fell backward. The second she hit the ground, she started yelling. Not normal yelling. Not angry yelling. It was chaotic. Her words were impossible to understand. A truck driver nearby noticed what was happening and started walking toward us. And immediately I knew how this was going to look. From his perspective, all he saw was a man forcing a woman out of a vehicle. He didn't see what happened on that highway. He didn't see the people hiding behind her car. He didn't see what I saw. I didn't have time to explain everything. I didn't want to stay there long enough for the situation to become even more complicated, so I shouted a warning toward him. I told him she was dangerous. Then I got back into my vehicle and left before he could reach me. I didn't look back. I drove until I found another gas station farther down the road. Once I stopped, I filled up the tank. Then I walked around to the passenger side and looked inside. I don't know exactly what I expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe I wanted to convince myself that I had overreacted. But when I searched between the passenger seat cushions, I found something. A small burner phone battery and a sealed package of zip ties. I just stood there, staring at them. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. Then I felt a wave of fear hit me. I didn't want to imagine what those things were for. I didn't want to think about what could have happened if I had stopped. If I had trusted the situation. If I hadn't looked back at that car. I threw everything away immediately. Then I got back on the road. I never reported what happened. Not to the police. Not to my company. Not because I didn't think it mattered. It absolutely mattered. But explaining everything would have opened up an entirely different set of problems. I would have had to explain why I was carrying a firearm, why I drove away, why I physically removed someone from my vehicle, and I wasn't willing to put myself through that. All I know is this. That night, being prepared may have been the only reason I made it home, because sometimes danger doesn't look dangerous at first. Sometimes it looks like someone who needs help. Sometimes it looks like a person standing on the side of an empty highway. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see, it's what you almost failed to notice. This happened about 3 years ago when my husband and I were driving across the country from Utah to Georgia. Our route wasn't the fastest way there, but my husband had planned the trip carefully because he wanted to stop at certain places along the way. The problem was that the more interesting the route became, the more isolated the roads became too, and there was one stretch that stood out above the rest. Western Kansas. U.S. Route Cat Scents. A road surrounded by endless farmland with miles and miles of nothing but open fields. No cities. No buildings. No signs of civilization. Just a road cutting through emptiness. We had already been driving for most of the day. At some point around sunset, I fell asleep in the passenger seat. I'm one of those people who can sleep almost anywhere, especially in a moving car. So I was completely unconscious for hours. When I finally woke up, it was around 10 at night. The first thing I noticed was that the car had slowed down. I opened my eyes and realized my husband had pulled into a tiny gas station just off the highway. He told me he wanted to fill up the tank and grab some snacks. I figured this was probably my last chance to use an actual restroom for a while, so I got out and walked inside. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't bring my purse. I thought I would only be inside for a minute or two. There was no reason to carry anything. The cashier was an older man sitting behind the counter. He barely looked up when I entered. The store was quiet, almost completely empty. The bathrooms were located down a narrow hallway toward the back. I walked toward the women's restroom and pushed open the door, and almost immediately I nearly walked straight into someone. A woman was stepping out of one of the stalls. Under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have thought much of it, but everything about her was strange. Her gray hair was messy and unwashed. It looked tangled and almost sticky. She wore old foam flip-flops that made a soft slapping sound every time she moved. But the strangest thing was her clothing. She was wrapped in a thick purple and green coat, a heavy winter coat, in the middle of summer, in Kansas. It was around 80 degrees outside. There was absolutely no reason anyone should have been wearing something like that. She carried a tied plastic grocery bag in one hand. When she saw me, she stopped, and she just stared. Not a normal glance. Not the kind of look strangers give each other in passing. She stared like she was trying to figure something out, like she had been waiting for me to walk through that door. It wasn't a normal glance. It wasn't the kind of awkward eye contact you have with a stranger when you accidentally get in their way. This was different. Her eyes locked onto mine with a strange intensity. It felt almost intentional, almost like she wasn't just looking at me. She was waiting for something, like she expected me to say something, like she expected me to make a specific move. The problem was, I had no idea what she wanted, so I did the only thing that felt natural. I gave her a small, polite nod and tried to step around her, but she didn't move right away. She just stood there, blocking my path for a moment longer than she should have. It was subtle, almost nothing, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. Eventually, she shifted aside and I walked past her. At that point, I convinced myself that was the end of it. Maybe she was just strange. Maybe she was having a bad night. Maybe I was overthinking everything. I just wanted to use the bathroom and get back to my husband. But when I reached the sink area, I realized she wasn't leaving. She had followed me. She walked over and stopped near the sinks. And then she just stood there, waiting. But what made it unsettling was that she wasn't doing anything. She wasn't washing her hands. She wasn't fixing her hair. She wasn't looking at herself in the mirror. She wasn't doing any of the normal things someone does when they walk up to a sink. She simply stood with her arms hanging by her sides, silent, still, watching. At that point, every instinct I had was telling me something was wrong. I didn't know what her intentions were, but I knew I didn't want to be alone in that bathroom with her. So I quickly walked into the nearest stall and locked the door. The second the lock clicked into place, I felt a wave of regret, because that's when I remembered something important. I didn't have my phone. I had left it in the car. No way to call my husband. No way to send a message. No way to get help if this situation turned into something worse. And suddenly that tiny bathroom felt much smaller. I sat there silently waiting, listening, hoping I would hear those flip-flops moving away, hoping she would finally leave. Minutes passed. At least it felt like minutes. Then, I heard it. The soft sound of her footsteps. That familiar slap of the foam sandals against the floor. She was walking toward the exit. A moment later, the bathroom door opened, then closed. The sound echoed through the empty room. I waited a few more seconds, just to be sure. And then I noticed something that made my entire body freeze. I could still hear breathing. Not mine, someone else's. Slow, quiet, close. My mind immediately started racing. She hadn't left. She had only pretended to. She must have opened the door, waited for me to believe she was gone, then quietly returned to her position, somewhere near the entrance, somewhere I couldn't see. Maybe standing in the corner, maybe waiting right outside my stall. I didn't move. I didn't even want to breathe. I sat there completely still, trying to make myself as silent as possible. Every thought in my head was screaming the same thing. Why didn't I bring my phone? Why did I come in here alone? Why didn't I trust that feeling telling me something was wrong? Time seemed to slow down. I don't know how long I stayed there. 30 seconds. A minute. 5 minutes. It felt like an eternity. Then finally the bathroom door opened again and closed. The breathing stopped. A huge wave of relief rushed over me. Maybe she was actually gone. Maybe she had finally left. But I still didn't trust it. Not after what had already happened. I waited. Another 30 seconds passed. I was just about to unlock the stall door when suddenly A loud gasp echoed through the bathroom, a sharp, desperate breath, like someone had been holding it in for a long time. Then the door opened and closed again. My heart dropped. That was when I truly started panicking. She had done it twice. Twice she had pretended to leave. Twice she had tried to make me believe I was alone, and I had no idea why. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know what she was planning. But someone playing mind games with you in an empty bathroom in the middle of nowhere at night is never a good sign. I sat there frozen, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to believe she was finally gone, but another part of me kept thinking, what if this time was another trick? What if she was still waiting? What if she was standing right outside the stall again? Eventually, the uncertainty became unbearable. The fear of staying became worse than the fear of leaving, so I slowly unlocked the stall. As quietly as I could, I opened the door and stepped outside. I was fully expecting to see her standing there, waiting, watching, but the bathroom was empty, completely empty. No woman, no footsteps, nothing. I moved quickly. I washed my hands as fast as possible and walked out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was somewhere nearby. Maybe hiding in another part of the store, maybe waiting outside, maybe watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. When I returned to the main area, I immediately noticed a large man standing at the counter checking out. I didn't know who he was. I didn't need to. I just knew I didn't want to leave that store alone. So I stayed near one of the shelves at the front and waited. A few moments later, the man finished paying and walked outside. I followed shortly after. Not too close. Not too obvious. I just wanted another person nearby. Someone who could see what was happening. Someone who could help if things went wrong. Part of me still wondered if I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the woman was harmless. That thought lasted exactly until I stepped outside, because the moment I left the store, I saw her. She was standing near the entrance, waiting. She wasn't walking away. She wasn't looking for her car. She was standing there like she had been expecting me. And this time there was no confusion about her expression. She was staring directly at me, glaring. Her eyes followed every movement I made. Then I noticed something in her hand. Something small. Something I couldn't clearly identify from where I was standing. At first, I thought it might just be some random object, but the longer I looked, the more it bothered me. It looked like a knife. I couldn't be completely sure, but it was the way she was holding it that scared me. Her grip, her posture, the way her body was slightly lowered, almost like she wasn't just standing there, almost like she was preparing herself, preparing to move, preparing to attack. And in that moment, standing alone outside a tiny gas station in the middle of nowhere, I finally understood something. Whatever was happening, I was not imagining it. I prepared myself for the worst. I was ready to scream, ready to run, ready to fight if I had to. Every muscle in my body was tense, waiting for that moment when she would finally make her move. But she didn't. Instead of coming toward me, the woman suddenly turned away, without saying a word, without changing her expression. She simply walked around the side of the building toward the back of the gas station. And somehow that scared me even more, because I still didn't know what she was doing. I didn't know if she had given up, or if she was just waiting for another opportunity. I didn't take any chances. The second she disappeared from view, I ran. I moved as fast as I could toward our car, opened the door, and practically threw myself inside. My husband immediately looked over at me. He could tell something was wrong. He asked why it had taken me so long. I didn't even know where to start. I just told him I would explain everything once we were back on the road. Thankfully, he didn't argue. He didn't question me. He simply started the car and pulled away. As we drove out of the parking lot, I couldn't stop myself from looking back, and that's when I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the building, watching us leave, not walking away, not going inside, just standing there, watching our car disappear into the darkness. I don't know why, but that image stayed with me. There was something deeply unsettling about it. The way she stood there, the way she looked completely calm, like she had expected everything that happened, like she was waiting for something. Once we were back on the highway, I told my husband everything. The strange behavior, the bathroom, the way she kept pretending to leave, the way she was standing outside, the object in her hand. He was understandably upset. Not because he thought I had done anything wrong, but because I had walked into that bathroom alone without my phone. If something had happened, I wouldn't have been able to call him. And honestly, he was right. Looking back, I still can't believe how careless that was. Eventually, though, we decided to let it go. We were on a trip. We didn't want one strange encounter to ruin everything, so we tried to move on. But one thing definitely changed after that. I don't use roadside bathrooms anymore. Not at night. Not when I'm alone. And honestly, I don't regret that decision at all. This next incident happened in 2020. I was 24 years old at the time, working for a small logistics company. My job was delivering automotive parts between cities throughout the Midwest. Most days it was actually a pretty easy job. Long drives, decent pay, a lot of time alone, nobody constantly watching over my shoulder. But there was one downside. The job meant spending countless hours driving through empty highways, often late at night. And after what happened, there is one thing I will never do again. I will never stop at a highway rest area after dark. It was the middle of January. One of those nights where the cold feels like it is soaked into everything. The kind of night where even the glow from your dashboard feels strangely bright against the darkness outside. I was driving east on I-80 from Des Moines, heading toward Davenport to deliver a package. The entire trip was supposed to take around 3.5 hours. I had left around 8 at night. By 10:30, I was deep into the quietest part of the route. No towns nearby, no buildings, no signs of life. Just endless highway stretching ahead of me. The only sounds were the tires rolling against the pavement and the occasional roar of a semi passing in the opposite direction. After a while, the isolation started getting to me. My eyes became heavier. I found myself blinking longer than I should have. That dangerous moment when your brain starts drifting and you realize you aren't fully focused anymore. I knew I needed to stop. Then I saw the sign. A blue highway rest area sign, 1 mile ahead. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about stopping. I just wanted to get out, stretch my legs, wake myself up, and maybe grab a drink from the vending machines. So I took the exit. The rest area was exactly what you'd expect at that hour. Empty, quiet, almost abandoned. There were a few weak streetlights scattered around the parking lot, a small brick building with bathrooms, maybe a dozen parking spaces, and almost nothing else. Except for one vehicle, an old white van parked at the far end of the lot. Away from the lights, away from everything. Its engine was off, its windows were dark, and nobody appeared to be inside. I parked my truck underneath one of the lights, locked the doors, then walked inside. The men's restroom was freezing. It smelled like a mixture of cleaning chemicals and old dampness, the kind of smell that immediately tells you nobody has been around in a while. A small heater in the corner rattled constantly, making this annoying mechanical noise. I walked over to the sink and splashed cold water onto my face. I was just starting to feel awake again when I looked up into the mirror, and that's when I heard it. The bathroom door opening behind me. Slowly, I turned around. Nobody was there. I stood completely still for a moment, listening, waiting, but the only sound was the buzzing lights and the rattling heater. I told myself it was probably the wind. Maybe the door hadn't closed properly. Maybe I imagined it. I finished quickly and decided I wanted to leave. But the moment I stepped outside, something immediately caught my attention. The white van. Its headlights were on. My stomach tightened. The engine wasn't running. The van wasn't moving, but the headlights were shining across the empty parking lot. I was certain they hadn't been on before. And the part that bothered me most was that I never heard anyone start the vehicle. Not once. A strange feeling settled over me. The kind of instinctive warning you can't explain. The kind that tells you something is wrong before your brain can figure out why. I didn't stand there trying to understand it. I unlocked my truck immediately, got inside, started the engine, and pulled out. As I drove toward the exit, something strange happened. The van's headlights suddenly turned off. Just like that. Dark again. For a second I tried to convince myself there was a normal explanation. Maybe someone was sleeping inside. Maybe they accidentally turned them on. Maybe I was just tired and letting my imagination run wild. But when I got back onto the highway, I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. Something about that van bothered me. For the next few minutes, nothing happened. The road stayed empty. The darkness stayed quiet. I started convincing myself that I had overreacted. Then I saw them. 2 small points of light appearing in the distance behind me. Headlights. Getting closer. At first I couldn't be sure, but as the vehicle approached, my stomach dropped. It was the van. The same old white cargo van. The same dirty exterior. The same boxy shape. No compane logo. No markings. No side windows. Nothing that explained who it belonged to. And it was coming straight toward me. Fast. Within moments it caught up. Then it moved directly behind me. Too close. Almost touching my bumper. And in the empty darkness of that highway with miles of nothing around us, I realized something that made my hands tighten around the steering wheel. That van wasn't just following the road. It was following me. I was already driving around 75 miles per hour. But the van stayed there. Right behind me. So close that I could barely see anything except its headlights filling my mirrors. It wasn't passing. It wasn't backing off. It was just sitting there inches away from my bumper, forcing me to feel its presence. Then, suddenly it moved. The van changed lanes, accelerated, and pulled up beside me. For a few seconds, we were driving side by side in the middle of an empty highway. I could feel my heartbeat getting faster. The driver rolled his window down halfway. I looked over, but I couldn't see much. Just a dark silhouette. The outline of a face. Maybe a baseball cap covering his head. Nothing more. Then he started gesturing. He motioned toward my window. He wanted me to roll mine down. I didn't. Something inside me told me not to. He kept waving, more aggressively this time. Then he pointed toward the back of my truck, the truck bed. At first I hesitated. A small part of me wondered if maybe he was actually trying to help. Maybe something had fallen out. Maybe one of my straps had come loose. Maybe there was some problem with my load. But then I remembered something. My truck bed was empty, completely empty. There was nothing back there. Nothing that needed fixing. Nothing that needed a warning. And that's when it clicked. He wasn't trying to tell me something was wrong with my truck. He was trying to get me to stop. He was trying to get me to open that window. I kept my eyes forward and pretended I didn't see him. I refused to react, but that only seemed to make him more aggressive. The van started honking. Then it drifted closer into my lane, close enough that I had to move slightly to create space between us. My instincts were screaming at me. Don't stop. Don't engage. Don't let him get close. Suddenly, the van accelerated. It pulled ahead of me and cut sharply into my lane. For a split second, I thought he was going to slam on the brakes. I thought he was going to force me to stop. But instead, he suddenly swerved onto the shoulder. The van came to a complete stop. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I pushed harder on the gas and flew past him. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my chest. I stayed in the fast lane, 80 miles per hour. Then, closer to 90. I just wanted distance. I just wanted that van behind me to disappear. A few seconds later, I checked my mirror, and my stomach dropped. The van was moving again. It was back on the highway, following me. For the next 20 miles, it continued, and the worst part was how unpredictable it was. Sometimes it would fall back, far enough that I thought maybe I had finally lost it. Then, without warning, it would accelerate, and suddenly there it was again, right behind me, like it had never left. At that point, I knew I couldn't keep driving like this. I needed people around me. Lights. Cameras. Witnesses. Anything. Then I saw a sign ahead. A truck stop. 5 miles away. I took the exit immediately. The moment I entered the parking lot, I pulled under the brightest lights I could find right near the diesel pumps. There were several large trucks parked nearby. Through the windows of the diner next door, I could see drivers sitting inside. People. Finally. The van didn't follow me in right away. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe they had given up. Maybe they realized there were too many people around. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Then I saw it. The van slowly entered the parking lot. Not rushing. Not searching. Just slowly driving in. Like it knew exactly where it wanted to go. Straight toward me. I immediately got out of my truck and walked into the diner. The bell above the door rang as I entered. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was probably in her 50s. The second she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. I told her what happened. That the van had been following me. That it had been trying to get me to stop. That it was outside. I must have looked terrified because she didn't question me. She immediately called over one of the truckers sitting at the counter. And this man was someone you would not want to mess with. Huge broad shoulders. Gray beard. Wearing a flannel shirt. The kind of person who looked like he had spent his entire life dealing with difficult situations. He stood up and walked outside with me. The moment we stepped out of the diner, we saw it. The van, parked at the far end of the lot. Engine running. Just sitting there, facing my truck. Watching. The trucker looked at it for a few seconds, then quietly said something along the lines of, "Yeah, that ain't good." He told me to go back inside. Then he walked straight toward the van. I don't know what he said. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I was standing. But whatever it was, it worked. Because a few seconds later, the van suddenly went to reverse. It turned around. The tires squealed. And it sped out of the parking lot, back toward the highway. The trucker came back a moment later. He looked annoyed, but also concerned. He told me there were 2 men inside, both wearing hoodies, both sitting completely still. And the strangest part, neither one of them said a single word. They just stared straight ahead, like they weren't even there. I stayed inside that diner for almost an hour. I didn't care how long it took. I wasn't leaving until I was absolutely sure that van was gone. When I finally continued my drive, I couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror. Every pair of headlights behind me made my stomach tighten. Every vehicle that slowed down made me wonder if it was them. When I finally reached Davenport, I didn't even relax. I parked under the brightest hotel lights I could find. Then I walked around my truck and checked everything. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was missing. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the tailgate. There were 2 marks on it. 2 dirty handprints, like someone had grabbed it, or tried to open it. I stood there, staring at those marks for a long time, because suddenly I understood something. The whole thing had never been about making me stop. The whole thing had been about getting close enough to my truck, getting me out, getting me away from other people. I quit that job a few months later. I never told myself it was because of one bad experience, but deep down I knew the truth. That night changed the way I see empty roads forever. Now whenever I drive long distances, I prepare differently. I fill up before dark. I bring food and water. I avoid stopping in isolated places, and if I ever do have to stop, it is somewhere crowded, somewhere bright, somewhere with cameras and people nearby, because I know exactly what could have happened if I had rolled down that window. I know what could have happened if I had pulled over. And the reason I'm able to tell this story today is because for once in my life, I trusted that small voice inside my head telling me one simple thing: don't stop.